Normandy, July 1944. An American Sherman tank sits at the edge of a French field, its engine growling behind 5 men sealed inside steel. Ahead of them is a wall of earth, roots, stones, and tangled branches. A Norman hedgerow. It is tall enough to hide a machine gun, thick enough to conceal an anti-tank team, and old enough to have been growing long before anyone imagined machines like this would cross Europe. The tank looks powerful. Its cannon can tear open a farmhouse. Its armor can stop rifle fire. Its tracks can carry it across ground that would exhaust the men walking beside it. But at this moment, the tank has a weakness no German gunner designed. It cannot hear. Picture an infantry sergeant crouched behind the Sherman. He has seen movement in a second-floor window on the right. He knows friendly soldiers are sheltering below it. He can see the exact place the tank needs to fire. Inside the Sherman, the commander sees only fragments through his periscope. The sergeant shouts. The engine swallows his voice. He strikes the rear armor with the stock of his rifle. The crew may hear the impact, but it means nothing. Is there danger ahead, behind them? Is the infantry asking the tank to stop, reverse, turn, or fire? The sergeant points toward the building. No one inside sees him. His remaining choices are terrible. He can climb onto the tank and hammer on the commander's hatch, placing himself on top of one of the largest targets in the field. Or he can run in front of the Sherman and wave his arms, hoping the driver notices him before a German gunner does. The United States had crossed the Atlantic with thousands of radios, artillery pieces, aircraft, and armored vehicles. Yet communication could still fail across the final few feet between a soldier and a tank. The answer was already sitting in American supply stores. It was ordinary. It was inexpensive. It had been in military service for years. And it had never been designed to control a tank. Soldiers placed a field telephone inside a protective metal box, mounted it on the rear of the Sherman, and connected it directly to the crew's internal communication system. Now the sergeant behind the tank could open the box, lift the handset, and speak straight into the commander's headset. Stone house on the right, second-floor window. Our men are underneath it. The commander could confirm the target without opening his hatch. The turret could turn. The gunner could aim. A few spoken words could redirect 30 tons of armor. The telephone did not make the Sherman stronger. It made the tank aware of what was happening only a few yards beyond its armor. And decades later, after tanks had gained thermal sights, digital systems, advanced radios, and computers, the United States Army would discover that soldiers still needed almost the same device. To understand why such a simple object mattered, we have to understand what happened when a tank commander closed his hatch. From the outside, armor gives a tank its power. From the inside, armor creates isolation. A Sherman was operated by 5 men: commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver. They worked in a cramped interior crowded with ammunition, weapons, controls, wires, and machinery. The engine produced constant noise and vibration. The main gun could fill the compartment with a violent concussion. Heat, dust, fumes, and exhaustion added to the confusion. When the battlefield was relatively quiet, the commander often remained partly outside the turret. From there he could see over hedges and walls. He could read the ground ahead. He could watch the infantry and exchange shouted instructions or hand signals. Then the shooting began. Machine gun fire, shell fragments, rifle bullets, and snipers could force the commander inside. The hatch closed. His world suddenly became much smaller. The crew still had vision devices. The commander still had access to the tank's radio. The 5 men could speak to one another through their interphone system, but the view from inside an armored vehicle was narrow and incomplete. A rifleman lying beside a hedge could see beneath its branches. A scout moving along a ditch could discover a hidden anti-tank weapon. A squad leader might know that friendly troops had already entered a building. The tank crew could miss all of it. Infantry needed the tank because it carried protection and heavy firepower. The tank needed the infantry because soldiers on foot could spread out, inspect the terrain, enter buildings, detect hidden threats, and protect the vehicle from enemies approaching at close range. The tank had power without a complete picture. The infantry had a clearer picture without the same power. Each possessed what the other lacked. Before an attack, their leaders could study maps, assign targets, agree on signals, and plan how they would move together. But a battlefield rarely obeys the plan for long. A route becomes blocked. A weapon fires from an unexpected building. Smoke hides the infantry. A tank enters the wrong field. A squad moves farther than expected. A position believed to be empty suddenly opens fire. At that moment, the original orders are no longer enough. Someone has to tell the tank crew what has changed. Radios could help, but not every nearby soldier carried one, and not every infantry unit was connected directly to every tank crew. The tank might be operating on one communication net while the infantry used another. A message could travel from a rifleman to a squad leader, from the squad leader to a platoon leader, and from there to someone capable of contacting the supporting tanks. By the time the information reached the correct vehicle, the target might have moved or fired. The distance between the observer and the tank could be 20 yards. The communication route between them could pass through several people. Sometimes the greatest barrier was not distance. It was the thickness of the armor. Normandy made this weakness especially dangerous. Much of the countryside was divided into small fields by dense hedgerows known as the bocage. These were not ordinary lines of bushes. Many grew from raised banks of compacted earth, reinforced by thick roots, stones, and trees. To the soldiers entering them, each field could feel like a separate compartment in a maze. A Sherman might force its way through a narrow lane or pass through a gap opened by explosives or engineering equipment. Once it entered the next field, the crew could see the ground directly ahead, but they might not see an anti-tank team hidden beneath the hedge. They might not see a machine gun covering the entrance. They might not see infantry waiting behind the bank they had just crossed. German defenders used the terrain to shorten engagement distances and hide their positions. A weapon could remain concealed until the tank was close. A machine gun could pin down the infantry while an anti-tank team approached the vehicle from another direction. A Sherman without infantry protection could become dangerously exposed. Infantry without the Sherman's cannon could be trapped by a position too strong to attack with rifles alone. They had to remain together. The hedgerows constantly pulled them apart. A tank could push through a gap while the infantry took cover behind the previous bank. Dust, smoke, vegetation, and uneven ground could break visual contact. The tank crew might hear enemy fire and turn the turret in the wrong direction. The infantry might see the target clearly but have no safe way to describe it. Soldiers tried whatever methods were available. They struck the armor with rifles. They threw objects at the turret. They used hand signals, smoke, tracers, and shouted instructions. Each method could attract attention. None could match the precision of a human voice. A strike against the hull could mean anything. A pointing arm could disappear from view. Smoke could be misunderstood. Tracer fire could expose the infantrymen using it. The problem did not require another signal meaning, "Something is wrong." It required a voice saying, "The weapon is behind the left corner of that building." The equipment adapted for the job was the EE-8 field telephone. In normal use, 2 EE-8 telephones were connected by wire. Dry cell batteries powered the speaking circuit, while a hand crank was used to signal the station at the other end. By wartime standards, it was familiar equipment rather than advanced technology. It was durable, widely available, and simple enough to be used in harsh conditions. Soldiers adapted the same basic idea for communication between infantry and tanks. A handset was placed inside a protective container on the outside of the vehicle, often toward the rear. Wiring connected it to the tank's interphone system. The infantryman outside did not need to search for a radio frequency, remember a call sign, or carry a heavy radio set. He opened the box, lifted the handset, and spoke. The tank commander heard him through the headset already worn inside. The commander could remain protected. The infantryman could stay behind the vehicle instead of climbing onto the turret. The message no longer had to travel through several levels before reaching the crew that needed it. One soldier saw the threat. One soldier described it. One tank could respond. The United States Army's account of the battle for Hill 192 records the use of special EE-8 telephones mounted on the rear of tanks and connected to their interphone systems. Hill 192 stood near St. Lo and overlooked important ground in the American sector. To attack through the hedgerows surrounding it, the 2nd Infantry Division prepared tank, infantry, and engineer teams to work together. The engineers opened paths through the embankments. The tanks moved through and fired into suspected defensive positions. Infantry scouts advanced, while the riflemen protected the vehicles from close attack. Each field became another small battle. The telephone helped the team adjust when reality no longer matched the plan. Imagine our sergeant again. Without the external phone, he sees a machine gun firing from a stone farmhouse. He waves at the tank. Nothing happens. He strikes the armor. The turret begins searching, but it turns left while the target is on the right. The sergeant must decide whether to expose himself by climbing higher or wait while the machine gun continues firing. Now give him the telephone. He reaches the rear of the Sherman, opens the box, and lifts the receiver. Farmhouse on the right, upper window, friendly troops below. The commander repeats the location. The gunner adjusts. The infantry prepares to move. The telephone cannot guarantee that the shell hits. It cannot prevent every misunderstanding. But it removes the delay created by guessing, waving, and passing messages through several people. That direct line also worked both ways. The tank commander could warn the infantry before firing the main gun. He could tell soldiers that the vehicle was about to reverse. He could explain which route the crew intended to take. Infantry could warn the tank that friendly troops had moved into a building or crossed its line of fire. The rifleman holding the telephone was not commanding the tank. The commander still controlled his crew and decided how to respond. The phone simply gave him information from people who could see what he could not. It did not destroy the chain of command. It stopped urgent information from becoming trapped inside it. The most interesting part of the story is that the idea did not appear only once. American forces in different theaters faced the same problem and began moving towards similar solutions. After the fighting at Macon in November 1943, an official Army account noted the difficulty of communicating with tank crews after their hatches closed and suggested placing a telephone on the rear of each vehicle. Marines in the Pacific also adapted external telephones for tank infantry communication. Before the 4th Tank Battalion sailed for Saipan in May 1944, improvised telephones had been installed on its tanks. Marine Corps Historical Research later described them as highly effective for coordination during the operation. These developments came before the lessons of the Normandy campaign could have reached those units. Then, in Europe, American soldiers fighting through the hedgerows fitted rear-mounted telephones to their own tanks. The same basic answer appeared in different places because the same problem appeared in different places. Once a tank closed its hatches, the infantryman beside it could no longer communicate easily with the crew. The solution did not depend on one legendary inventor working alone through the night. It emerged from experience. Soldiers looked at the equipment around them and connected existing pieces in a new way. The telephone already existed. The tank's interphone already existed. Protective metal boxes already existed. The innovation came from placing them together where the infantryman could reach them. That is often how battlefield innovation works. The most useful idea is not always a completely new machine. Sometimes it is a familiar object moved to the exact place where an old system keeps failing. The phone mattered because battlefield information loses value quickly. A division commander may understand the larger campaign. A battalion commander may know the plan. A tank commander may know the capabilities of his vehicle. But the soldier lying beside a hedgerow may be the only person who can see the flash of an enemy weapon 50 yards away. His information is local. It may remain useful for only a few seconds. The external telephone allowed that information to move directly from the observer to the crew capable of acting on it. It was also easy to understand. A frightened and exhausted infantryman did not need specialist training to recognize a telephone handset. He did not need to tune equipment or enter a code. He needed to reach the rear of the tank, lift the receiver, and speak clearly. That simplicity was not a minor advantage. Battlefield equipment is used by people operating in noise, mud, darkness, smoke, and fear. A device that works perfectly during a demonstration but becomes too complicated under fire has little value. The purpose of the telephone was obvious the moment a soldier saw it. It still had limitations. An infantryman had to reach the rear of the tank, which could be dangerous. The box and wiring could be damaged by fragments, vegetation, collision, or rough terrain. Directions could become confusing if the soldier and the tank faced different ways. The phone could not replace training. Infantry still had to understand the tank's limited visibility and turning space. The crew still had to understand the infantry's movement and objective. Engineers still had to open routes through obstacles. Artillery still had to be coordinated. Soldiers still had to protect the tank from close attack. The telephone was valuable because it strengthened an existing team. It turned cooperation from a plan agreed upon before battle into a conversation that could continue after the shooting began. That lesson survived long after the Sherman disappeared from frontline service. Tanks became faster, more heavily armed, and vastly more advanced. They gained night vision, thermal sights, improved radios, computers, and digital communication systems. The M1 Abrams belonged to a completely different technological age, yet the central physical problem remained. The crew still operated inside a loud armored machine. Infantry still fought outside it. The soldier standing closest to a threat was not always connected to the tank crew's radio network. During the 2000s, the United States Army developed the Tank Urban Survivability Kit for Abrams tanks operating in demanding urban environments. Among its components were tank infantry phone installation kits. The battlefield had changed from the hedgerows of Normandy to streets lined with concrete buildings. The tank had changed from the Sherman to the Abrams. But soldiers once again needed a handset mounted outside the armor and connected to the crew inside. This did not mean advanced radios had failed or that technology had moved backward. It meant some human problems survived technological revolutions. Radio channels can become crowded. Different units may not share the same network. Call signs and procedures consume time. Buildings and terrain can interfere with awareness. A soldier may be standing only a few feet from the tank and still have no direct way to speak to its crew. Sometimes the clearest route between two people separated by inches of armor is still a handset and a wire. The telephone on the Sherman was never the most impressive object on the battlefield. It carried no armor. It could not destroy a bunker. It could not stop an anti-tank round. It could not force a path through a hedgerow. It simply allowed one human being to speak directly to another. But a tank's cannon was useful only when the crew knew where to point it. Its armor was useful only if the vehicle avoided threats the crew could not see. Its mobility was useful only if the soldiers around it could help identify a safe route. The telephone connected the machine's power to the knowledge surrounding it. Return one final time to the sergeant behind the Sherman. Before the modification, he could see the danger but could not reach the men who had the power to stop it. Afterward, the distance between them had not changed. The armor was still there. The engine was still roaring. The battlefield was still chaotic, but now he could open a metal box, lift a handset, and speak. If you enjoy stories about the small inventions that quietly changed enormous battles, subscribe for the next one. A telephone, a metal box, a length of wire, and on the other end, a tank commander who could finally hear the soldier standing only a few feet away.